You are living on a planet where more than 50 countries are involved in active wars. Forget the diplomatic language. People are being shot. Buildings are burning. Families are being buried. This is war, not a headline. And here's the uncomfortable question. Is this the start of World War III, or are we already living in it? Your grandparents' generation had one word for global war: never again. That was a promise. It wasn't a guarantee. We usually think war means something big, obvious, and impossible to ignore. What if it reaches you, not as war, but as empty shelves? No fuel, no network. Because that's how it really begins. Slow, silent, ignored. And there's one moment, one trigger, that can flip everything instantly. We'll come back to that at the end, because once you see it, you won't look at the world the same way again. Let's look at the major fault lines where the world is currently breaking. Russia, Ukraine. The attrition trap. In Ukraine, this is no longer fast war. It's become a war of slow damage. Millions of lives have already been lost or permanently changed. Russian forces are advancing at historically slow rates, moving just 15 to 70 meters per day. What if this line breaks? NATO countries like Poland, Hungary could be pulled in directly, and once that happens, it will no longer be just Russia versus Ukraine. USA-Iran war, a confrontation at the Strait of Hormuz. There's a narrow route here called the Strait of Hormuz, controlled by Iran, the route that carries nearly 20% of the world's oil. Now, Iran and the USA are locked in direct military tension in the Strait of Hormuz to control world's oil. War here isn't one battlefield, it's multiple conflicts, connected. Sometimes there's a ceasefire, a few days of silence, but nothing is solved. No trust, no stability, just a pause before it begins again. If that route is blocked, fuel prices, transport, food, everything becomes expensive. Middle East war, the regional cycle. A war with no exit. This is not one war. This is people trapped inside a cycle that never really stopped. In Gaza, the war between Israel and Hamas continues, following years of attacks, blockades, and retaliation on both sides. In Lebanon, Israel and Hezbollah are now locked in a full-scale exchange, and in just days, hundreds of Israeli strikes have targeted Hezbollah near Beirut outskirts, with thousands killed and injured. In March alone, hundreds of missiles and drones were exchanged across this region, so even when it slows down, it doesn't end. It builds pressure, and every time it comes back bigger. Sudan's civil war, a country collapsing in silence. In Sudan, this is a civil war between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces. 150,000 plus dead, around 14 million displaced, and about 700 civilians killed by drone strikes. But it's not just internal anymore. Outside powers are watching and getting involved quietly. And Port Sudan sits next to one of the most important trade routes on Earth, the Red Sea. Control this, and you control a major part of global shipping through the Suez Canal. Myanmar civil war, a fractured war with no center of control. In Myanmar, the military government is fighting its own people, pro-democracy forces, and ethnic armed groups. This started after a coup, but now it's a full civil war. Around 80,000 to 95,000 people have been killed, and Myanmar is producing roughly 20,000 to 40,000 metric tons of rare earth minerals every year, and nearly 50 to 60% of China's imports depend on this supply. China has strategic interests here, so this is no longer just a local fight. It's part of a global supply battle. Taiwan strategic tension, a high-stakes geopolitical flashpoint. Taiwan sits at a critical global fault line. China claims it, Taiwan governs itself, and the US supports Taiwan. That alone is dangerous. But here's the real pressure point. Over 60% of the world's semiconductors and more than 90% of the most advanced chips are produced here. If conflict starts, phones, banks, hospitals, internet, the modern world slows down or stops within days or weeks. These wars are not separate. They are fought through proxies, sanctions, cyber attacks, and supply chains. Unseen and unspoken. For some, it remains a shadow war. For others, it feels like the beginning of World War III, because what happens in one place doesn't stay there. Ukraine affects food supply. The Middle East affects oil. Myanmar affects critical minerals. Taiwan affects technology. All of it connected. Food, energy, technology, supply chains. If one breaks, the pressure shifts to others, and eventually, the entire system begins to feel it. Remember that one moment, that one trigger we talked about. It's when all the pressure we've seen, one move, it turns into something irreversible. 90 seconds to midnight, the nuclear reality. There are 9 countries on Earth today with nuclear weapons. The United States, Russia, China, France, United Kingdom, India, Pakistan, Israel, North Korea. Together, they hold over 12,000 nuclear warheads. And beyond them, a few countries already have the technology and materials to move toward nuclear weapons. Now imagine this, not a global nuclear war, just one tactical nuclear weapon used on a battlefield. Smaller than Hiroshima, but powerful enough to devastate a city. In seconds, everything changes. In minutes, decisions have to be made. What happens next is the part no one talks about. Retaliation, confusion, miscalculation, and suddenly, control becomes uncertain. And this truth no one wants to hear. World wars don't begin with one explosion. They only end like this. They actually begin when enough small, silent conflicts finally connect. But the real danger may not look like that at all. It could look like fuel stops reaching cities, prices rise overnight, banks slow down, internet becomes unstable, no communication. Not one big moment, but a slow, quiet breakdown of everything we depend on. And the most dangerous part? Are we slowly moving towards world war? Or are we already in it?